Hi, everyone. Let me first go ahead and start by introducing myself to all of you. My name is Tara, and I'm really excited to be walking through this Tableau for DDJ course with you all. Before we get started, if you could go ahead and type something into the chat or the Q&A box, just to let me know that the audio is working correctly, that would be great. And then I will go ahead and get started. Awesome. Sounds like the sound is working correctly. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about myself. My name is Tara, and I work as a data analyst here on the Tableau Public team. And basically, I'm just really excited to be working with you guys over the next 5 weeks. I love data visualization, and I'm really excited to see the types of things that you guys will end up creating with the different types of data. So today, what we're basically going to be doing is, let's just go ahead and check out the syllabus. So I posted a link to this in the Reddit, but this is our syllabus right here. And today, we're basically going to be going through the skills gained under here. So basically just how to orient yourself in Tableau, what a dimension is, what a measure is, how to create different chart types, how to, once you have the charts, how to manipulate them to make them look the way you'd like using the marks card. Then being able to filter using quick filters to show only different types of data that you like, and a couple of other things. So let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to first familiarize you with Tableau Public. So Tableau Public is the free version of Tableau Desktop that we provide. So as you can see here, when you open up a copy of Tableau Public, this is the screen that you'll be getting. So you have a spot to open data right here, which we'll be doing in just a second. You have some of the other workbooks you've been working on recently. They'll be listed right here. And then you have some other resources along here. We have some training videos. So let's say I go through a part in this course a little too fast for you, and you want another video to just further solidify the understanding. Here's where you can go and find some other videos to help you with this. And then there's also a spot about get inspired. So this is, we create a blog, and we blog, 2 or 3 posts a week, or, a couple posts a month. And they're all just cool things for you to look at. They're how-tos. We have contests that we hold. And then we also have guest blog posts. And so if you hit get inspired right here, that'll show you one of the more recent blog posts that we've done. And so then further down on the start page, we have our Viz of the Day section, where we highlight a Viz every day and basically just say, hey, look, this author did this really cool, or check out how they're using story points, or some other type of thing that makes a Viz exceptional. And if you ever make a Viz that you think is really awesome, please send it my way, because we love making our Tableau for DDJ students Viz of the Day. I feel like it's a really cool way to highlight and show all your hard work. And so just a note about the lectures, for those of you who are listening in, thank you. And along the way, please, if you have questions or comments, or if you want to see something different, or if you have an idea of what we can do with the visualization, please type it into the chat or the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to get to those. And if for those of you who are not listening in, who are listening to the recorded version of this, I'll be providing a place on our Reddit stream where you'll be able to discuss different things and talk about this with your peers and me as well. And then what I'll be doing after the lecture ends today, I'll be posting it to the Reddit, and I'll be posting the assignment for the week. And what the assignment really is trying to do is just have you practice what we're learning in the week. We really want you to become self-sufficient and know where to find resources for your visualizations, and we want to provide you with the skills necessary for creating some awesome data visualizations with Tableau. And so that's a place where it's going to be really great to interact and comment and get to know some of the peers in your class, so that you can say, hey, great viz, or hey, question, how did you do that? And it's a really great place to build our own little Tableau for DDJ community. So now that we've oriented ourselves with Tableau Public, for those of you who are listening in, do you have any questions about Tableau Public, the start page that we're looking at right now, or anything like that in general? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions come through right now. Please go ahead and type those in along the way if you have any. So today we are going to be looking at earthquake data. So this is data from the USGS, US Geothermal or Geographic something. But anyways, we have all the recorded earthquakes over the last month. So today is July 4th. We have every single earthquake that's happened all the way back to June 14th of this year. And we have a bunch of information about these earthquakes. So we want to use Tableau to visualize this, to see, okay, are there stories in this data? Can I do some data exploration and then use the data exploration that I've done to create a visualization? So as you can see here, we have the time. We've got time, latitude, longitude, and a bunch of other pieces of information about our data in this first row. And then each row below our header row is going to represent one earthquake. So this is really important before we get started and bring this into Tableau to make sure that our data is structured the way we'd like it to bring it into Tableau. We want it really clean. We don't have any headers up here. We don't have any additional extra information up top. Down at the bottom, we don't have any footers. It's really clean data. As a term that you'll hear quite frequently. And then the other important thing is we have a row is a piece of data, and each column is going to be information about that piece of data. So as you can see here, each row is an earthquake, and then each column is a piece of information about one particular earthquake. And one of the lectures, I think it's either week 2 or week 3, we'll talk more about if you have data but it's not clean, how to get it to be that way. So now that we've go ahead and checked out our data, we see that we have a bunch of different information about these. We have the depth, so where this earthquake is happening underground, how far underground. We have the magnitude, and this goes anywhere from, you know, a really, really small earthquake like a 0.6 magnitude. I'm pretty sure in here we have some like 7.5, 8 magnitude earthquakes. So really, really powerful earthquakes that can potentially be dangerous. So this is our data that we're going to be using today. So now that we've made sure that our data is clean and there's no headers and there's no footers, let's go ahead and just start analyzing and asking some questions in Tableau. So I'm going to open up Tableau. I'm going to open up a new copy of Tableau. And now I'm using Tableau Desktop today, but if you have Tableau Public, it'll be nearly identical, except for when we are saving to the web. So this is what the page looks like when you open up Tableau. As you can see, these are the workbooks that I've been working on recently. And then we have this orange spot over here that says Connect to Data. I'm going to click that. So what we were just looking at, the data was in a CSV, so a comma-separated variable worksheet, which basically means that we have a bunch of different pieces of information that are separated with commas. And so the way Tableau is interpreting that as a text file that's delimited by commas. So I'm just going to go ahead and select text file under Connect, and I'm going to navigate to where I know my data set is on my computer. And once I've clicked earthquake, that's the name of my CSV file, I can say open. And so now what Tableau is doing is it's bringing in the data that we had just looked at in Excel. So if we look down here, we have all that information we just saw in our CSV file. But Tableau has brought it in and kind of interpreted it a little bit for us. But now we have to go ahead and look and see if Tableau did it correctly, because at the end of the day, we're the data experts on this data. Tableau might make a mistake and miscategorize something, and it's our job to make sure that all of the information is appropriately assigned to these different categories per se. So as you can see here, we have all of our column headers that are the same as in our Excel spreadsheet. We have latitude, longitude, magnitude, and a couple other pieces of information. But then Tableau has gone a step further, and we have these little icons that live below, not below, they're more information on these columns. So as you can see under time, we have a little icon that looks like a calendar. Under latitude and longitude, we have a little icon that looks like a globe. And then we have a pound sign under some of them, and then we have ABC under some of them. What these are is the data types that Tableau is interpreting as. So time is being interpreted as a date or a time field, which is good. That's what we want. Latitude and longitude are being interpreted as geographic, which, knowing that latitude and longitude describe somewhere on the globe, this is a good association with that. The pound sign is a numeric field, and we can look down and see depth and magnitude. Yep, both of those are numeric. Good. ABC represents a string, so we look and see, okay, string. And then we can look along the rest. We've got more numeric fields. We've got some more strings. And it looks like so far that Tableau has correctly identified these types. And just one quick note before we move on. We're working in a CSV file, or a text file. And so when we bring that into Tableau, we only have one option to choose under Files over here. And Tableau has automatically placed earthquake.csv over here in our visual data window. But let's say we're working in an Excel spreadsheet where you have, 2 or 3 tabs that you can have along the bottom of that. All of those tabs in your Excel spreadsheet will show up right here. So you'll be able to control and point Tableau exactly where you know your data lives. Now we have our data in Tableau, we can go ahead and start the process of asking and answering some questions about these earthquakes. So let's go ahead and select Go to Worksheet. Now what we have here is a blank canvas, somewhere where we can start by saying, what questions do I want to ask and answer? What do I want to discover and look for in this data? So I can look here and I can see that my blank canvas has a lot of different things going on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start by going through and giving an overview on what we're looking at, where we can place different pieces of information to create these data visualizations. So over here, we have dimensions and measures. Now, on top of Tableau identifying each field or piece of information about an earthquake as string, date, numeric, and geographic, Tableau has gone a step further and said, okay, I'm going to say that some of these are dimensions and some of them are measures. Now, a dimension is basically a categorical field. So something that we can slice and dice the data by. We can slice and dice the data by the place, by the time. They're usually things that we do not want to do math on. We don't want to find the average ID. We don't want to find the maximum ID because it just doesn't make sense in terms of the data. Whereas a measure is something that we're going to want to do math on. We're going to want to find the maximum depth, the maximum magnitude, maximum gap, minimum gap, average gap, sum of the gaps, things like that. These are things that we're going to want to do math on. And now you may wonder, so why is time or year a dimension? Well, that's because we're going to want to slice and dice the data by the years. So because we're going to want to do that, that's why it's up here as a dimension. And then if we look over here, there are a lot of places where we can have the ability to alter the visualization that we're looking at. This we call the rows shelf. This we call the columns shelf. And then we have the marks card here and the filters shelf here. And then the nice thing about Tableau is that it's super visual. If you have a question, you can begin to ask and answer your questions so quickly because of how visual and easy it is. So let's say I'm looking at this and I want to know, where are these earthquakes that I'm looking at? Maybe more have happened in South America. There was a lot that were occurring off the coast of Chile a couple months ago, but how about in the last month that we have data? Are all the earthquakes down in South America, or are there more in Washington where I'm from? Who knows? So to explore that question some more, I can just go ahead and double-click latitude and double-click longitude. So now what we're looking at is a map, but it's not really what I want to look at. I mean, I look at this and I see, okay, there's one mark on Illinois. Interesting. Why Illinois and why only one mark? If I go back to my CSV, I can see there are way more than one earthquakes. In fact, I think I have close to 1,600, or more than that. I have over 8,000 earthquakes that happened in the last month. So it doesn't make much sense that we only have one mark. Well, what Tableau is actually doing is taking all of the corresponding latitudes and longitudes of all the earthquakes that we have in our data set and finding the average of them. See this AVG up here? That means we're taking the average longitude and the average latitude and plotting it on a map, which we know isn't exactly what we want. So what we can do is we want to break this up. We want to get more detail onto our map. We want to break it up and see all the specific locations of just one earthquake. We want one mark for one earthquake. Well, we know that we have a unique ID for every earthquake. If we go back and look at our data, if we find ID, so ID is this column right here, and it looks like they're going to be unique. And in fact, they are. All of these are unique. So one earthquake is corresponding to one ID. So if we go back to our map in Tableau, what we can do is take ID and let's add some detail to our map. And usually when we're trying to alter the view that we're looking at, we're either going to add something to one of these two shelves or we're going to use the marks card. And in this case, we're going to use the marks card. The marks card is one of the most powerful things that you can do when you're trying to alter the view. So if we look on here, we know we can alter the color, the size, label, the detail, and the tooltip. Now I'll get to the other ones later, but right now we're going to add detail to our map. And we want to add the detail according to the ID. So if I just go ahead and drag ID from dimensions, I'm just going to click and I'm going to drag it and drop it on detail. Wow, that is more what we want to look at, because now we can really tell and start to look and see, okay, where are the earthquakes in the world? It looks like we have a large number of earthquakes on the western part of the United States and in Alaska, and we also have a lot of earthquakes on the Pacific Rim. So now what Tableau has done is it's broken up all of the data points in our CSV file. So now we have one mark for every single earthquake that we have in our data, which is much, much, much better. And this is what we want to look at. But what if we want to ask another question? Cool, now I can see all the earthquakes, but I want to ask the question of maybe, how about where are the deepest earthquakes? You know, the ones that happen closer to the surface, those are the ones that can potentially cause the most damage. But where are the ones that are the deepest, and where's the distribution of those? Are there a lot of deep ones in the Pacific Rim, maybe near the Pacific Ocean, or maybe on land there are more deep earthquakes? So what I can do is then I can go ahead and drag depth onto color on the marks card. So I'm just going to grab depth from measures on our underneath our measures and drag that and drop that on color. So now what Tableau has done is it's taken this color scale that we have right here and assigned this lighter gray color to those that are not that deep and this dark green color to the earthquakes that have the largest depth, that happen the farthest below the surface. So as you can see here, it looks like we have a lot of very deep earthquakes that happen down here, off New Zealand and some of the islands in this area. And then we also have some deep ones up here. So now I really want this to be more clear to me. I want to have some more visual, quick answering of my questions. And so another thing that we can do, which is done relatively frequently, is have it dual encoded. And by that I mean have depth represent the color and also the size. Okay, so now it's really quick and clear where all the deep earthquakes are. They're definitely over in this area, the Pacific Rim area. I'm just going to stop for questions real quick. Okay, looks like we are good on questions. Just going to check and make sure that all of the sound is working well. All right, looks like we're good to keep continuing on. So now that we have this map, what if I want to make it even clearer to my audience where these very deep earthquakes happen? It looks like, there's a diverging green. So I've got some lighter green in here, very dark green down here, but I can change the color of this. Tableau is great in that you can really have the power and the flexibility to make the view look however you'd like. So maybe I think that a different color scheme would help my readers to really process and see where the very deep earthquakes are occurring. So to change the colors, I can go over here to my color legend and select this drop-down caret. I select the drop-down caret and say Edit Colors. Now I have many different options on different colors that I can use for my color legend for depth. So there's a ton of different options. I personally think that I'd like to try orange blue diverging. And then we can even go a step further. There are a lot more different options on how we can color code these. Let's say that I want to set my color. That means that I'm going to say, don't give me a range, give me a range, but have it be in a certain number of buckets. So let's say I want 10 buckets. And now I'm looking at what my color scale will be, and I see that, wow, okay, I'm not really getting much of the orange in here. I'm getting a lot of this blue because there's probably a lot more earthquakes that are throwing off this scale. So what I can do is I can say advanced. If I click on advanced, I have the power to say when I want my color legend to start and where I want the center to be. So where I want to flip from orange to blue. So let's say I want my center to be in the center of this range. So we have negative 68.8 is the low end, and 619.4 is the high end. So let's say I want my center to be around 300. Why not? And then I look at this, and I say, okay. But then I'm seeing, okay, I have all of my small depth as this orange color, my deep depth as the blue color. And that's good. I like that because then it's really clear and easy to see where these differences are. So I can see, okay, down here, let's go ahead and zoom in and just check out what's going on down here. I can use my zoom controls and just zoom in and see down by Australia. Wow, look at all these earthquakes over here. I have a lot that are happening down here in the last month. And this is a point where you could create a really awesome story. If you know that there's an area in the world that has a lot of earthquakes happening in a certain amount of time, what a great thing to pair with your story is a great visualization in Tableau that shows where they all are. But let's say I want to ask another question. I want to say, are these earthquakes, maybe these earthquakes are really low magnitude. They could be either really deep or really not deep. But what's the magnitude on these? If I only want to look at the earthquakes that have a really high magnitude, how can I begin to do that in Tableau? Well, it's actually really easy. And this is going to bring us into the quick filter realm, where we're going to filter and say, Tableau, I only want to work on a certain portion of this data. I only want to see those with a magnitude of 5 or higher. So what I can do this one of two ways. I know that I have magnitude right here under my measures. So the first way that you can create a quick filter where you'll have the power to say and control how much of the data you want to look at. On measures over here, the magnitude, if we right click on magnitude and say show quick filter, what that's done is now we have this quick filter where we can really easily and quickly filter through and say, okay, I only want earthquakes that are magnitude 5.16 and higher. And so now I can really quick and visually see that a lot of the earthquakes that are of high magnitude are still in the Pacific Rim, right over in this area right here. And we've got 3 earthquakes that are very high magnitude. These 3 very deep. These 3 right here, But then all of these have high magnitude. We can even go so far as scrolling all the way down and seeing just the one that had close to an 8 magnitude. We can scroll down, 5.84. I'm just going to go ahead and set it as the full range, or maybe we'll see those that are 3 and higher. And that's only filtered out a couple that are in Alaska really quick and visually. We can see that. And that might be something along the lines of maybe there's a lot of stations that are recording the earthquakes in Alaska. And this brings us back to the same point of we're the data experts. So we are the humans in this where we can go in and really see and understand why these are happening. So if we know that there are 100 different earthquake stations in Alaska, and there maybe are, maybe there's only one in Australia, maybe there's none in Australia. That's something where we're going to have to process that and take that with a grain of salt. So this is really part of the data discovery process. So now that we're filtering on the magnitude of these, let's say that I also want to go ahead and look at the time. How have these earthquakes changed over time? Have they changed over time? Has there been a year where there was a lot of earthquakes in general? So to ask this slightly different question, I'm going to create a new sheet and start looking at this from a different angle. So before I move on and create that new sheet where I'm going to be looking at this over time trend, so earthquakes over time, I'm going to rename this sheet. It's kind of best practices as you move through your data discovery to remind yourself on what you were looking at, what you were working on, by just renaming these down here. So you can either double click on the name where it says sheet 1 down here, or you can right click and say rename sheet. So I'm just going to call this map. That way I'll know really quickly where my map is when I'm working through Tableau. All right, so now to ask this different question on over time, which years have the most earthquakes? I'm going to go to a new blank canvas. So there are 3 different ways that you can create a new sheet, and a sheet is just this blank canvas that we started working on here. So way 1, or option 1, is selecting this icon down here. It's the icon towards the bottom that has the 3 little bars on it and the little plus sign. That'll get you to a new sheet. Another way is clicking on this sheet right here, or this button right here, and clicking on a new sheet. And then the third way is going to this worksheet here and saying new worksheet. And again, I'm working on a PC today, but Tableau is offered on the Mac, which we are very excited about, but it'll be nearly identical on the Mac when you're creating new sheets. So now that we have this new sheet here, let's go ahead and ask this question. Over time, when were there peaks in earthquakes? When were there more earthquakes? When were there less earthquakes? So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to see over time the number of earthquakes. And so before I move on, let's interpret this. So we see that when I drag time to columns, Tableau automatically dissected my date for the time for me and figured out, Tableau is basically saying, this is how you want to see the date, right? And then I can go in and say either, yeah, that's it, or no, not really. And so looking at this right away, I see, okay, all I have on my view right now is the year 2014. So knowing my data, I know that I only have a month's worth of data, and all of my data is in 2014. So breaking it up by 2014 isn't really going to do much because I'm only going to have one bucket, and all of my data is going to fall into that bucket. So I can change and dissect my date more than just the year by clicking on this little drop-down caret on this pill right here. And then I have a bunch of different options. I have some discrete fields here and some continuous fields here. Continuous just meaning it runs on a scale of -infinity to positive infinity, and discrete being these buckets that we were talking about. And since I know that my data, I have it daily and I have it by, time stamped, so I really do have close to continuous data. So I'm going to want to look at my dates continuously. I'm going to want to see June 14th, 2014 all the way to July 14th of 2014 continuously. So let's go ahead and change this data type that we're working with to day. So we're looking at these individual days in our data set. So let's click day there. And again, to change that, all you have to do is click the drop-down caret on the pill of the time pill, and then we have a bunch of different options. So just to visualize this, we were on year, where we had 2014. We could go to quarter if we wanted to, where we see, okay, we have data in Q2 and Q3. Or we can go to month, where we have data in June and July, where these are just two discrete buckets where our data will fall into. Or if we want to look at something, let's say continuously. Now we have this continuous axis, but because I have it set to year, although it's continuous, we still only have one value. So I'm going to go ahead and break it up into day. But another way that we can do this and break this up into day is by clicking this plus sign right here. So now it's basically adding more detail to our view. So now we're on the quarters, and you can see we have two different quarters here. And we can continue to break this up until we have months, weeks, days. And this is what we want. We want to see the days of our data. But cool, now we can see all the days that we have in here, but we want to see more information about this. We want to see the number of earthquakes. And so now there comes a point where we're going to have to kind of think about how our data was structured and how we can gather that information. So our data was structured where we had each row is an earthquake. So each row represents one earthquake that happened in this month. Tableau is going to interpret that as number of records. So number of records can be very powerful when you're using Tableau. It'll basically show you if you have a data set that says, say, has 50 earthquakes. So number of records would take, okay, how many earthquakes do you have that correspond to June 14th, 2014? And it'll give you that value. So I can drag number of records onto rows. And look, wow, now we really quick and visually can see what days have had the most earthquakes over this month. So automatically my eye goes to this point right here. Looks like June 24th is the day that had the most earthquakes in the last 30 days. And it looks like we had another spike on June 27th. But then, looks like for the last little bit, the number of earthquakes has been decreasing. So I wonder if we gather this data in a month from now, how that trend will continue. Is it going to be very, cyclic, or is it going to be on a continual downturn of less earthquakes? I don't know. We can find the data on that later and ask that question then. But just looking at this, it's really awesome because it's super visual and super easy for us to see. Let's say I actually don't want number of records. One awesome thing in Tableau is this back button is so powerful and it's so easy to use. And it actually, your back button will work as far back as you've opened Tableau. So let's say I don't want number of records. Backspace, it's gone. Then I realize, oh, maybe I do want number of records. Forward arrow. Boom, it's there. So it's really quick and easy, and it gives you a lot of control on the data that you're looking at. So this is great. Now we can see we have this timeline of these number of earthquakes. So I'm going to change the color of this. I can go over to color on my marks card and just change the color. Let's say I want to make it gray. Let's say I want to make it teal. I can do that on the marks card. So now we have this timeline where we can look through the different days and see what the number of earthquakes was. And I'm actually going to just jump back real quick onto our map and make one more change that I'm just now noticing. When I hover over these earthquakes, look at what I'm getting in my tooltip. Now that isn't very informative to me. I don't know about you, but I don't really care about the ID number of these earthquakes or the longitude and the latitude of these earthquakes because I can already see it visually. So we can easily alter this tooltip. If we go over here and click on tooltip, we get this tooltip editor. And this is a rich text editor, so we can say whatever we'd like in here, and we can change it, bold it, italicize, things like that. So I might say, change this and say, just have depth, and let's uncheck include command buttons. So the command buttons are what you see when you hover over, an earthquake. These right here are the command buttons. And we very, very rarely use these command buttons. You almost always see the command buttons hidden when you are dealing with a visualization published to Tableau Public. So let's go ahead and keep with that consistency, and let's uncheck include command buttons. Let's see what that looks like. So now we have that same tooltip, but we just don't have the command buttons at the bottom. So looking at this map, I can see really quickly that I can find the depth of an earthquake, but I also would like to see the magnitude of these earthquakes too, so I can, draw some parallels and see if there are any connections between the depth and the magnitude. So what I'm going to have to do to make magnitude show up in my tooltip, I'm going to have to add it there. So the idea behind this is we can't show information on the tooltip that we haven't already assigned to the tooltip. And what I mean by that is we have to take so magnitude from our measures, and just drag it and drop it on tooltip. So now we have the information in the tooltip when we go to edit it by just clicking tooltip on the marks card. I have the option to add it in, and this is the way that I like to add things onto my tooltip. If you click insert over here, we can insert all of these different pieces of information into our tooltip. And if I scroll down and look down here at the bottom, I see sum of magnitude, and that's what I'd like. So now I've inputted this piece of information here, so when I hover over a different mark, that magnitude there shows up. So something else that I can do is go in and actually say that I'd like, let's say magnitude, and then have that there. And maybe I'd like, maybe I'd like magnitude to also be this gray color that I have depth as. And I'd like it to not be bolded. Now we have it as the same gray color. And then let's also just unbold it. So now we have a much better tooltip that will give us some meaningful information when we look at our map. Sorry for that little tangent, so let's go back to our timeline. Let's go ahead and change this tooltip again. So if we go to our tooltip, let's instead this time have it be a sentence. So it's more colloquial, so we can have it be a little bit more informative. So let's say, on this day, and I can just highlight and drag the date information wherever I'd like in my tooltip. On that day, there were some of number of records, earthquakes. So now these two different fields here are highlighted in gray. And that just means that Tableau understands that this is a dynamic field, and that when I hover over different spots on my map or on my timeline, that pieces of information is going to change. So when I'm hovering over this spot for June 17th, the number of earthquakes will likely be different from if I hover over on July 7th. It's just going to be dynamic and change according to where I'm looking at on my map or timeline. And then again, let's uncheck include command buttons and say okay. And let's just go ahead and test this out. I'm just going to go ahead and hover over this day where we know there are a ton of earthquakes. Perfect. Now it's filled in those pieces of information according to the spot that I'm looking at on my timeline. So it says on June 24th, 2014, there were 754 earthquakes. That's a valuable piece of information. On June 30th, there were 222 earthquakes. That's another valuable piece of information, and it's really quick and easy for us to see the number of earthquakes by hovering over it with the tooltip. So now that we see, the days where there are more earthquakes than not, the trend for the last month, what if I think that I kind of want to see if those earthquakes that are very deep, that are large in depth, are they also high or low in magnitude? And Tableau is another great platform where I can actually ask and answer this question. So I'm going to just rename this as timeline. And then I'm going to open up a new sheet. And I'll open up a new one this time a little bit differently than I did last time. Let's go ahead and use this icon right here. So now I have a new worksheet. And now I can begin to explore the question of, is there some sort of correlation between the depth and the magnitude of these earthquakes? So let's go ahead and just drag magnitude to rows and drag depth to columns. So similarly with the map, when we dragged magnitude and depth onto our columns and rows shelf, Tableau has summed all of the magnitudes and all of the depths and given us one single point. We know that we have more than one earthquake, so we're going to break up this view. We want more detail on ID. So we can drag ID under dimensions to detail right here, drop it on detail. Okay, so now I'm looking at this and I'm saying there are a lot of earthquakes that are not very deep right here, but there's a really wide range of magnitudes. And this is really interesting. It looks like for those that have a magnitude around 5, there's a really wide range of depth, but not so much when I get up into the higher magnitudes. But I feel like this isn't showing us all that much conclusive information. So we don't really necessarily need to show this. It's just part of our data discovery. But let's say we want some advice or some help from Tableau on what other types of views I can use to look at this information. So I can go over and look at Show Me. So I click on Show Me. Show Me is something where Tableau is saying, okay, if you've brought magnitude, depth, and ID onto the view, these are some of the different types of visualizations that you can create that we think will look good. So the ones that I've highlighted are the ones Tableau says, yep, with the information you have, you can create a text table, or you can create a tree map, or a bar chart, or a bubble chart, pack bubbles. So let's just go ahead and explore some of these. So this is the packed bubbles, and again, I'm not really seeing anything where this isn't going to give me any more information. It looks really cool, and it's really pretty, but it's not giving me any meaningful information about these earthquakes that have occurred. Let's try a bullet graph. Again, not really that much information. How about a bar chart? Definitely no information from there. How about a tree map? So I can just go ahead and explore my data and look at the different types of visualizations that Tableau thinks that you can create with it. But at the same time, we have to use some of our data masters, our data knowledge, and know that everything that I've seen just recently, it doesn't look all that compelling to me. I'm not getting that much information out of it. So you know what? I don't need to use this combination of these measures and dimensions. I can just go ahead and say, not really finding anything interesting. I can just clear the sheet by selecting this button right here. And now I'm back to a blank canvas. Another thing that I could have done there is create a new sheet and just keep my work from the other one, and that's fairly common as well. So let's say, are there any questions so far from those of you who are listening in, or is there anything else that you'd like to explore and see with this earthquake data? All right, looks like we're just going to keep on moving along. And let's go ahead and combine the exploration that we've done. So we explored the map and saw visually where all the earthquakes are and how deep and the magnitude of these. We saw in our timeline where the spikes are in our data on the number of earthquakes. Let's say we want to combine these pieces of information and we want to show our readers really quickly and clearly, hey, this is what I found. This is what you should look at in this data. So to do that, we are going to we are going to create something that's called a story. So to create a story, we're going to click on Story, New Story. So story is along the top, New Story. And what we have here now is a way where we can combine these sheets that we've created and the questions that we've asked and the answers that we've found into one place where we can say, present it to someone and say, hey, look at what I found. So the first important thing when you're creating a story is to make sure that you know what your CMS requirements are. So if you are at an online newspaper or a blogger and you know that the site that you're publishing to has a width requirement of 600 pixels, we're not going to want to create a story that's any larger than that, or 700 or 800 or so on. So it's really dependent on your case. Today, I'm just going to go ahead and make a story that's 800 width, and let's go ahead and say 700 in height. So as you can see here, now I have the right size canvas to bring on my map and my timeline. So the first piece of information that I'm going to want to share with my audience, I can either share something about the map or something about my timeline. Oh, sorry, we've got a question here real quick. Okay, so the question is, what's the difference between stories and dashboards? So dashboards we're going to get to next week in lecture 2. And a dashboard is a place where you can put multiple different sheets on your view and have them interact with one another. A dashboard is a way to really quickly and easily show your audience what you're looking at. So you can add these different story points. So you can add multiple story points and then freeze the view. So if you know there are a lot of earthquakes that happen in the Pacific Rim, we can zoom them out to the Pacific Rim and say, hey, look at this. There are a lot of earthquakes here. Or we can say, oh, hey, look, June 24th has a lot of earthquakes. So they're a way to just kind of freeze the view and have your reader really quickly scan through. And so we'll definitely go more into dashboards later, or if you have any specific questions about those, please feel free to email me. All right, the next question that we have is, can you put some different color in the timeline bullets? Yes, you can. We'll get more into that in a couple of weeks. We'll have to be using a dual axis for that, but we can go into that more in a couple of weeks. All right, any other questions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. So now that we have this blank canvas for our story, we see instead of having dimensions and measures along the side over here, we now have these sheets that we've created. And so if we had created any dashboards, they would also show up here, which we'll see more again next week. So we have the map and we have our timeline. So let's just go ahead and start by dragging out our map. So now what we can see here is our map has come into the view, and we've also brought in the quick filters and the legends that we had on our sheet. So we can see that all of that work we did on making the colors the way we wanted them and having these filters has come through into our story. So now looking at this map right here, it's the author's job to figure out, okay, if someone's coming to look at this for the first time, what piece of information do I want them to gather? What do I want to highlight for them? So I can go ahead and zoom in on, let's say, the Pacific Rim. There are a lot of earthquakes that occurred in the Pacific Rim. And then maybe I want to zoom in even further. There we go. Okay, so now it's really clear that we have a lot of earthquakes in the Pacific Rim area. And we can still filter on magnitude and see that some of the earthquakes disappear. But now that we've changed and altered our map, we need to go up here and update our story point. So now that we've figured out what we want people to see from this map, we're going to want to add a caption. So maybe my caption will be the Pacific Rim has a large number of earthquakes. And then let's say we want to show our author or our readers, another point. So we can go ahead and either have a new blank point, or we can duplicate this point and make another highlight or another annotation. So let's go ahead and duplicate this point. What Tableau has done now is given us an exact duplicate of what we just created. So now we can kind of explore this and figure out, okay, what do I want to highlight next? Are there any other pieces of information that I want to show that have people see? So maybe I'm looking at where the highest magnitude earthquake is. And I'm seeing this on the tip right here in Alaska. So let's just go ahead and zoom to that area. But then I'm realizing, okay, maybe I don't want to show that. Maybe I actually want to show, more specifically, these earthquakes that are happening near New Zealand. So we could say the earthquakes occurring in the Pacific are very deep. And then what's maybe another thing that I want to show my readers? Maybe I want to show them more about the timeline and see over time how the number of earthquakes has changed. I can take my timeline from under here over my worksheets and dashboards. Okay, looks like Tableau is not enjoying us right now, and this will happen from time to time. With this, what we're going to have to do is actually go back and rebuild what we've created. But it'll be really easy because we've already explored the data. We've already gone through and asked and answered some questions. So let's just go ahead and close this real quick. And yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. Sorry about the technical difficulties, everyone. If you want to go ahead and retype your questions into the chat box, that way they'll pop up on my screen. Right now, the technical difficulties aren't allowing me to open up the chat box. So you can just retype those in, then I'll go ahead and get to those now. All right, everyone, I am so sorry for the technical difficulties. My computer is not letting me close out of Tableau. I'm glad that we got as far as we did in recording this lecture. I'll post in the Reddit what we're going to do about this. I might go ahead and re-record this lecture, so you're more than welcome to listen to that. But then I'll also be posting our assignment there. So again, really sorry about this technical difficulties that we're having, and I really hope to connect with you guys more. Please feel free to drop a comment or a concern or question onto our Reddit stream, and then we will be able to communicate that way. And again, so sorry about these technical difficulties. I will definitely be re-recording this lecture so that we can all look at it and have it as a reference. So thank you so much for joining in today, and sorry that this I didn't get to finish up today. Did you see what just happened? That happened to me too. In the middle of my lecture. It happened at the very end. I don't even know how to get out of it. Do I have to restart my computer? I tried doing that. It won't close out.
Probably picking up like all of your and find Tableau. It's Tableau or
Tableau.
End process.